Little Once by Nina Kiriki Hoffman. It didn't cry much past its 6th month. That seemed to be when it learned what the slaps meant. On the other hand, it refused to die. She couldn't bring herself to kill it directly. Somehow she just couldn't. Maybe that was the last grasp of the Catholic in her. Of all the commandments to get stuck on, why that one? She didn't keep any of the rest. She tried leaving it out on the balcony in the snow. The balcony, that little strip of thing about a foot wide with iron railings just beyond it. Just an excuse to hike up the rent, she thought. No person of decent size would stand on that little fragment of floor. She'd been angry with the balcony size since she moved in on the 9th floor apartment, just before she had the thing. So one night, when the snow was falling, she wrapped the thing in a light blanket. Without a blanket, it would be too plain, somehow, and put it carefully on the balcony in the wet. Wouldn't it be lovely, just if it squirmed a little and happened to slip through the railings? A fall like that, the little head might burst open. Nobody in the street would know which apartment it came from, right? When she opened the window in the morning, pulling her robe tighter against the cold and watching her breath mist, and all that was another thing. Not enough shillings for the heater, and here she was letting all the paid-for warm out. When would that thing stop leeching off her? It lay there in the snow in its blanket, and the ice, its black hair, seemed to stare at her. Such a pale little thing, not a bit like its gypsy da. Horrible yellow eyes. Now whose fault was that? She wasn't sure if it were alive or not. It shouldn't be, of course. Just as it shouldn't have lived through the week that she forgot to feed it. If she closed her eyes and gave it a little push with the toe of her slipper, wouldn't it just slide over the edge? And then she could move. That snoopy, nosy Parker, Mrs. O'Malley next door, was always threatening to report her to the child welfare authorities. It blinked. After that, she had to fetch it in. Couldn't kick it. Could she? Not over the edge, anyway. She took it in and gave it a few slaps for making her lose the warmest air. It made a tear or two, but it had learned not to yell. Leave it in the same diapers all day, see if that taught anything, lock it up in the closet. By supper time, she relented. She brought it out and changed it and fed it some nice hot soup. Maybe a little too hot, but it could learn to blow, couldn't it? She patted its head. It leaned against her and closed its eyes, almost like a cat. She had a kitten once, when she was little. What a soft thing. And making the sweetest noises, like a funny music box, warmed against her. Da broke its neck one night because it clawed him. She picked up the thing and held it against her. Warm? Ha! But what would a smell? What was the use in changing it when it was just going to make another mess? She couldn't go on like this. The paper ditties were killing her. And the neighbors? What's its name? Oh, isn't it a charming one? Fat lot they knew. Couldn't keep their noses out of other people's business, could they? Bloody great cows. She was carting it along like a packet one day to the Petticoat Lane. Unusual she left it at home, but that day she just had an impulse, and as little as it ate, it hardly weighed anything, when the gypsy woman came nagging after her. The old creature wore a gnarled scarf over her head, a man's teetered tweed suit jacket trousers, and pill soles. A mother, are you? A nice mother? A sweet little mother, said the woman, tugging at her coat. Shab off, you old cow, she said, jerking off her coat from the woman's hand. Dost want it? The wee one? She glanced at the old, pinched face. The permanent squint in the eyes lifted the lips as she could see the gold front tooth. Had the creature ever been live and young? What's your game, Ma? She asked. If you were to find the babe a burden, if you wouldn't last to lighten your purse, say, 50 quid, and lighten the load as well, if you were wanting to such a fine young lady. She glanced about. In the pell-mell in the open of the market, shoppers rushing, folk hawking, singing out their wares, the racks of clothing, lining walks, booths where knives and jeweled sheaths and leather goods and cheap finery hung. No one looked towards her and the old woman. "What are you on about? Are you with the yard?" "Oh, no, lady," said the creature, darting, glancing both ways. "Not a bit of it." What do you want with it?" She glanced at the thing. Its yellow eyes were fixed on the old woman. "You wouldn't snuff it, would you?" No, said the creature, staring into the thing's eyes. "I'd send it off somewhere else. It'd be safe and lively, lady. It'd be gone, mayhap 15 years down the road before it came back, but you'll be away by then, eh, lady?" She meant to spend the money on a new handbag and a good pair of lined leather gloves, that with winter coming on. But if this little thing were gone, think of the savings in ditties alone. She'd save up tips, and soon she'd have enough for a pair of gloves again. With the thing gone, maybe she could bring a man home again. And a man gave presents sometimes. She could say that she'd sent it off to the relatives, and she'd be planning to save off her ages, and it would be true, too, so far as she knew. All her relatives were dead, Da being the last kicked off. There, in the center of the market, were the action and the noise all around them. Time seemed to slow. She handed the thing off to the old gypsy woman. She counted all the money, the last pound and loose shillings. She turned and walked away, the quiet following her. It was snowing the night it came back. She had been on and on to the landlord about the caulking around the windows. All the cold seemed to come in, especially around the windows leading to the balcony. Every winter she complained. Some years he sent somebody to take a look, but the handyman would always just say that there was nothing off about it, and she must have been a bloody lunatic. So she shivered in the cold at nights. There weren't enough blankets in the world to keep her warm, she thought sometimes. She was huddling in the blankets, drinking tea with a splash of gin, when the knock came. She thought it might be Harry. He didn't really care for her, though, but it might be. "Come," she said, and sipped the tea. And it was the monster. But for the yellow eyes, she wouldn't have known it. From such a little bit of thing, it had grown so big. She looked at it and felt all the years on her, each like a weight crushing her down, and the cold that had seeped so deep inside her had never left. "I'm tired," she said. It came in and sat down and stared at her. It looked so much like Da. But they all did after a while, all the monsters the world called men. "You were little once," she said, and then she laughed, a terrible laugh that did not end.